Alright everyone, today is going to be a Deadeye classified build video, but it will not be using the 6-piece, it will be using 5 pieces and Reckless. However, before getting started and talking about all the details, I want to give a tremendous shout out to Anti-Skell. He has made this video possible and quite likely more videos in the future. So again, a huge, sincere shout out to Anti-Skell. Thank you, man. I really appreciate what you've done for me and the channel, and I look forward to producing more content. So now that said, let's begin. The composition is 5 pieces of Deadeye classified gear and the Reckless chest piece. Now it's pretty simple because every single piece is going to be rolled to firearms. That's the only thing that you need to care about. You're going to be running less than 3,000 stamina, less than 3,000 electronics, and over 10,000 firearms with the finished product. That keeps it pretty simple in terms of what you're going to be rolling and what you're looking for in terms of main stat. Before reviewing each individual piece, let's talk about Deadeye, let's talk about the 6-piece and why you don't want to be running 6-piece classified Deadeye and instead want to be running 5. The 2-piece bonus is initial bullet stability, that's not very important at all. The 3-piece bonus is 20% marksman rifle critical hit damage, which is very, very good, especially when paired with the 4-piece. When zoomed, marksman rifles lose headshot bonus, but gain 50% critical strike chance when out of cover, and 100% critical strike chance when in cover. So you're going to be taking cover with this set constantly, and then gaining 100% critical hit chance, which then applies all of your different modifiers, and can give you tremendous amounts of damage against enemy players and NPCs alike. So the 4-piece is super valuable. It is a little bit situational, you do have to be in cover. Not a lot of people like using cover, but as I'll demonstrate in the gameplay, it can be used to devastating effect. The 5-piece bonus, and this is the important part, this is what we are stacking the classified up to, is an additional 40% initial bullet stability, which we don't really care about, and an additional 20% marksman rifle critical hit damage. This is where you're getting the potential for those one-shots. This is where you're getting the potential to drop someone in less than a second from down the block and they don't even know what hit them. But the 6-piece bonus, which you do not want, is when zoomed, getting a headshot kill with marksman rifles will increase critical hit damage by 20% every second to a maximum of 100%, and will increase stability by 100%, and last for 10 seconds or until no longer zoomed. The reason this is so bad is because A, you are losing your headshot bonus modifier from the 4-piece, but then they're requiring you to get a headshot kill, as well as the fact that you have to remain scoped in for 10 seconds and in cover. That is essentially, in Division PvP, a death sentence. So the 6-piece bonus of Deadeye is effectively useless. You can use it in PvE if you want to, but I don't really focus on that. At least that's not the topic of this video. So the 6-piece Deadeye you want to completely ignore. You don't need 6. You want the 5 for that 20% marksman rifle critical hit damage. Reviewing each individual piece, we will start with the backpack. Now, it's important to roll as a major attribute critical hit damage. You can roll something else like health, but you will simply cut down on your damage. You'll cut down on the amount of damage per shot that you can deal, especially to enemy agents, and it's not something that you want to do. Now, it is a glass cannon build, so if you're not a fan of being a super glass cannon and really being able to drop people in a fraction of a second, but also being able to be killed yourself in a fraction of a second, then you can opt for health here. It's not that much crit hit damage to lose, but crit hit damage is the best thing to run in terms of synergy with the rest of the set. Ammo capacity as a miner is always good on the backpack, but it's not absolutely essential. Now we have our Deadeye trigger gloves, and the gloves are a little bit harder to get because you do need a specific set of 3 attributes, so in any build the gloves are a little bit more tricky to find the right rolls. You want firearms, as always. You want marksman rifle damage, absolutely. That's the most critical component of the gloves. And then you want critical hit damage, absolutely. 17% is a huge bonus as a major. And then you don't really want critical hit chance. Now this can be of use if you have a secondary and you're not running 2 marksman rifles, but it really isn't going to have an impact when paired with the 5-piece Deadeye. So you want to opt out of critical hit chance and roll something like skill haste or enemy armor damage. One of those 2 things. Next up is the holster, which, like I say in every video, is straightforward in almost all builds. You're going to roll health here, although you don't really have to. You can swap that out. It's not much health. If you really want to go full glass cannon, you can go reload speed, which will increase the amount of damage you can output over a longer period of time, or you can go skill haste. Skill haste would also feed into some of your gun talents, so health, skill haste, it doesn't really matter to me. I would say health is decent for increasing at least a little bit of your survivability, but the skill haste can double as survivability and damage, so it's really up to you, personal preference here. Now we have our knee pads, and the knee pads are another example of rolling for critical hit damage as a major. Now you are sacrificing a lot of health, and I've already said it a bunch, but I'll say it again. You can switch this out for raw health, which is equivalent to roughly 500 main stat of stamina in the amount of health that it has. and that will increase your survivability. So you're losing 9% critical hit damage, which you will get a lot of value out of, though it isn't essential. For minor attributes, you always want damage to elites. That's the most valuable minor attribute on knee pads. And then outside of that, you can get bleed resistance, although it doesn't really affect Predator's mark. Unfortunately, the 6-piece classified Predator goes right through bleed resistance. But you can get things like disrupt resistance, fire resistance. Any of those are good. Now we have our mask, and on the mask we are rolling enemy armor damage and damage to elites as a minor. Now this is a little bit flexible. Enemy armor damage does not necessarily give you as much value as some people think. However, it does give you a few percentage points of damage if you stack enough of it. And that is compounded by the fact that we're using a high damage marksman rifle. So enemy armor damage in most builds won't be as good, but in this build, it can make the difference between a 1-shot and a 2-shot, allowing you to win an encounter. So enemy armor damage is advised here in the, the sense of a glass cannon build to really go down that route of gameplay, though it isn't necessarily essential. You can roll pretty much anything else as a major attribute here, and you won't drastically hinder the build. Last up, we have our chest piece, and this is a reckless chest piece. This amount of damage, the damage of 8% flat onto your weapon's base, it's too much to ignore. It will increase the incoming damage by 10%, and that is a lot to handle. This build is not something that you should be running up close and personal. It's not something that you can handle, multiple enemy agents around you and survive and still take them on. You really have to pick your battles and pick your positioning, but Reckless is the best in slot for this purpose of a high damage, long range marksman. For major attributes, you have enemy armor damage. You can switch that out for skill haste. It will still give you increased damage by allowing you to proc booster shot more often, as well as give you bonus mitigation and bonus healing, but enemy armor damage will give you just a couple of percentage points when stacked on everything else. Extra weapon damage, which does mean a lot, and then health. You absolutely want health as a major attribute here. It's a no-brainer. For a minor attribute, ammo capacity is always nice, but not 100% essential. As long as you have it on either the backpack or the chest piece, you should have enough ammo to do whatever you need to in the dark zone. For weapons, we have two different choices here, and it just depends on what you prefer and how you like to play. The number one choice is an M700 Carbon, and there is a clear spread of top 3 talents here. You have Prepared, Deadly, and Competent. It's important for Competent to be in the 3rd slot because it does require electronics to activate. So you will be able to unlock it for free and then pair it on top of Prepared and Deadly, which are both simply firearms talents and they require no other additional main stats. And all of these bonuses will give you huge amounts of damage from cover, especially when over 30 meters away, which is where you want to be fighting from. Since you're not really afflicted with optimal range penalties as much as pretty much any other build in the game, you want to be fighting from a far distance using Prepared, and you can drop enemy agents before they even have a chance to use any of their heals. So Prepared, Deadly, Competent, in that order, is the god roll for this build. If you are missing any one of these talents, it won't necessarily make the build unusable, but you will see a hit to your efficiency. The second choice is a Paratrooper SVD, or any SVD that has all of the mod slots will serve this purpose. Now, the reason for this is because the SVD has very good stability and accuracy, and also has very high RPM when compared to most other marksman rifles. Now, you have Prepared, Deadly, and Competent. Again, the perfect role for this gun and for this build, but you don't necessarily need all 3. You're able to spam shots very quickly and deal a tremendous amount of damage because of that. You can't necessarily one-shot. The M700 Carbon is where you're going to be getting these one-shots when they do happen if you snapshot your bonuses correctly, but the SVD is more reliable damage over a longer period of time. For weapon mods, it's very straightforward. As an extended magazine, you want magazine size, critical hit damage, rate of fire, and then you want critical hit damage as the major in every other slot. 19% from your underbarrel, you get another 19% from your muzzle brake, you get another 19% from your scope, and whatever else is on there doesn't really matter. If you can get accuracy, that's great. Optimal range doesn't really matter. But as long as you have critical hit damage in the major slot on all of your gun attributes on both guns, or on, whichever marksman rifle you're choosing to run. For gear mods, I've opted to run all firearms mods with skill haste. Now, you don't necessarily have to run skill haste here, but it does have the best double efficiency effect when paired with survivability and increased damage because you have Competent on both of my weapons in this case. Skill haste is the most efficient stat to run on your gear mods. If you're looking for survivability and you have opted to run exotic damage resilience in some other slots, then you can pick it up here, but EDR is only effective if you put it in multiple locations. So since I have none and I'm going full glass cannon, skill haste, absolutely the best choice. For performance mods, you always want pulse critical hit damage. Now you can swap some of these things out if you're trying to run mobile cover or something like that, which is not the intent of this specific variation of the build, then you can switch these performance mods. But for this type, this variation, pulse critical hit damage is a no-brainer. You don't want pulse critical hit chance because you will be in cover and thus gaining 100% critical hit chance. So it would be a dead stat. Pulse critical hit damage, however, when you have 4 performance mods of it, is an additional 8% critical hit damage, which you will trigger on every single landed shot while in cover and scoped in. For abilities, pretty straightforward. You're going to be running Tactical Scanner Pulse. Not a lot of people are running Conceal or Scrambler nowadays, so Tactical Scanner will usually proc on enemy agents, and it has a base damage increase built right into the Pulse. It also gives you increased crit damage, which is 17.7%, which can stack on top of everything else to give you huge amounts of burst damage potential. Has a fairly low cooldown considering our skill power of 48 seconds, though that's not very low. Which will trigger Competent, and then you're going to be running Booster Shot. I always run Booster Shot now as a staple. Unless I am specifically a healer build, you will never catch me running something like Overdose. I feel that it is useless compared to Booster Shot, given the baked-in damage and damage resistance. Booster Shot will give you 15% increased damage, has a 43-second cooldown, and thus will pair with Competent to give you 25% increased damage for snapshots of 10 seconds. This can make the difference between a 1-shot and a 2-shot on an enemy agent and is extremely powerful. Last up is talents, and there's a little bit of flexibility here though. You have critical save, which I recommend on pretty much any build. Gives medkits a tremendous amount of value. Strike back, that's really good for helping you get your skills back and then trigger Competent more often. And then you have tactical advance. Now, I don't really do cover-to-cover moves all that often, but if you are moving cover-to-cover constantly, this can be a really big bonus. This can easily push you over the threshold to get a one-shot on any incoming agent for about 5 seconds. Now, it is a really short duration. 5 seconds is not very long. You have to, aim in, scope in, then land the shot. But it can be done, and it can be tremendously powerful if you opt to run it. I also opt to run Steady Hands since I'm going to be entering and exiting cover constantly. Steady Hands will give me a lot of value. Though you can swap it out if you don't really need it, if you feel that you can land shots or you're on PC or something. I'm on console personally. If you're on PC and you can land a lot more shots anyways, then you might not need Steady Hands. And if you don't really want to run Pulse, if you want to run mobile cover, then I would recommend running Precision instead of Steady Hands, using the mobile cover, and then maybe even swapping out Tactical Advance for something like Tech Support. When you kill a hostile with any skill deployed, it will extend the active skill duration by 10%. This will allow you to sit in your mobile cover more often. There are some other combinations. You can run Smart Cover and Mobile Cover, but you do sacrifice damage in that instance, more reliable damage over a longer period of time. But you do have a lot of increased bulk and, survivability if you do that. So there's some flexibility, like I said, but this is the variation I'm opting to run with Tac Advance and Steady Hands. Scrolling over our character sheet really quickly, we can see critical hit damage of 176% as a base without pulse being applied. This means that every shot taken while scoped in from cover will have a 176% modifier on top of your base damage. And your base damage, if we go back to our weapons, is very, very high. On the Carbon, it's 185, again, pre-booster shot, pre-competent, without prepared active, without pulse active and the increased critical hit damage, and then 84.9 on the Paratrooper SVD. These are tremendously powerful guns, and it'll speak for itself in the gameplay what you can actually do with this amount of damage. Hopping over to some gameplay, it becomes really important to recognize positioning, right? You want to sit back in the fight. You want to be somewhere where they're not going to shoot you immediately. If you have a squad, that's even better. This build does work solo. And if you're fighting rogues, it doesn't really matter as much because you can see them coming, you can track their progress, you can set up in a location where they're heading towards, and then you can melt them as they come around a corner. But when you're by yourself and you're flagging rogue on other people, you really need to be aware of where they are versus where you are, and if you have enough distance to drop them before they get on top of you. As you can see a couple seconds ago, I was dealing over 100,000 damage per shot to enemy agents. Now, with a gun that has an RPM of well over 1250, 1260 actually, and you're dealing over 100,000 damage per shot quite easily, and that is nowhere near as high as it can go. If you pop a tac link, even higher. If you have Tactical Advance active, even higher. If you have every single snapshotted bonus online, you can deal up into the 140 range. But either way, if you have all those bonuses, you're dealing that much damage, and you have enough space, then you can take them down faster than they could ever, really be equipped to handle. Anything short of a dedicated healer build is not going to be able to heal through the damage that you're outputting. You're going to deal huge amounts of damage through enemy signatures. If you land even just a couple of shots, if you have enough distance, you can drop them. but it's always important to relocate. One of the mistakes that I kept making when I was first trying to gather my footage is that I wasn't really taking the time to step back. I wasn't taking the time to retreat and get a favorable position for myself where I had enough distance, where I was proccing prepared on my gun, where I had those different bonuses active. And when I wasn't doing that, I was dropped very easily. I melted over like paper, and they probably were thinking how terrible I was at the game. But that's not actually true. It's just a matter of being in the right spot. Now, as you can see here, I'm locking them down. I can swap back and forth between my M700 for a potential one-shot or my SVD for much higher sustained damage over time. Lob some grenades in there, but then when they do get on top of my position, I have to fall back and relocate. A lot of times after even just a single encounter with enemy teams, they'll learn exactly what's going on and they will become extremely timid. They will not push you all the time. They're not going to run in blindly like they did the first time, because you can fold over a team of 4 in a matter of seconds. And when they're all down like that, they tend to wake up and think to themselves, okay, never mind, the straight frontal assault approach maybe won't work against an enemy who's using this build. And that's why it's so fun, because you're forcing other people to adjust their playstyles. You're able to deal more damage than I've seen, you know, in a couple patches. Honestly, I haven't run a build like this in a while. I stepped away from Deadeye after they did the recent changes, and now realizing how strong it is, not the 6-piece, but the 5-piece with Reckless, it is really fun to get back into it. So even here, I picked the wrong position. I was right next to an NPC, and I am a glass cannon, so the NPC was able to melt me, but during that time, I still dropped 2 enemy agents as they came around the corner. And someone, this is kind of a, you know, the battle cry of this channel, but someone with better aim than I do is going to be able to use this build like no other. If you are able to land all of your shots, then you can face down multiple teams from a crow's nest, you know, 100 meters away, and just wipe them out before they get even close to you. Very fun to use, but again, positioning is key, and a lot of people don't really like to have this little amount of toughness. As these agents come around the corner, I drop 2 of them very, very easily yet again. I'm dealing over 100,000 damage on each shot. That's without all of my bonuses properly snapshotted, you know, properly procced. That's without attack advance. That's without attack link. That was without booster shot, actually, at that point. And you can get much higher than that still. So again, if you're looking for damage, look no further than this. If you're looking for a marksman rifle build, in lieu of the fact that Hunter's Faith is not coming out until another couple of weeks, and even then you'll have to farm for it, Deadeye is the way to go. You don't need all 6 pieces. You can melt enemies like they're nothing, like they're wet paper, and I don't know, there's not that much else to say. But again, it comes down to positioning. You do have to adjust your playstyle. Personally, I had a little bit of trouble getting this footage because when I first started, I kept staying in cover for too long. I kept thinking, no, it's okay, even though they're closer, I can still melt them if they get in my line of sight. And that wasn't really true. You have to always be adjusting. You have to always be thinking about that. And there are multiple different layers to it. You have to be in cover and then scope in. And that's a lot of different actions to take rather than just simply shooting the target like you do with Striker or a similar gear set like Predator's Mark. And some players may not like that. I didn't like that at first, but then realizing how strong it really is and how much room there is for tactical decision making and for strategic gameplay, I realized that this is quite likely my favorite gear set yet again. Now, this agent gets on top of me. I said, okay, it's time to retreat, time to get some different bonuses online, and then get a different piece of cover. So I fell back to this radiator or air conditioner or whatever it is, drop another one, and then they realize he gets pinned down behind cover because they can't be out in the open. I mean, similar to traditional life, if you are running up on a sniper, you can't really just run out in the open. You have to find cover. You have to move from a car to a different car or something like that. And these agents weren't doing that. So I'm able to deal well over 100,000 damage there yet again. And then drop another one, but then an agent comes out of the safe house and gets on top of me, so it's important to always pay attention to that. That's going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I very much appreciate it. There are many different iterations of this build, and again, a giant shout out to Antiscale for making this video possible, and quite likely more videos in the future. So again, dude, I really, really appreciate that. If you swap out purple damage to elite mods, then this can become a killer PvE build. This is not just a PvE gear set, or a PvP, I'm sorry. This is not just a PvP gear set. It can also be for PvE as well. Simply swap out to purple damage to elite mods, and that's another giant chunk of damage, and you can really rip through enemy agents and NPCs alike. So thank you guys for watching again. And as always, check out the links down below if you want to support the Upper Echelon forums. Check out the Twitch stream, whole bunch of different ways to support, and have a nice night.